Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1078 just came out, and I am a huge fan of the York reveal, though not necessarily for the reasons you may think. So, if you know anything about me, if you've followed this channel at all in the last few weeks, you've probably picked up on the fact that I'm a mystery fan, right? Specifically a murder mystery fan. Specifically a fan of whodunit style murder mysteries, right? That is my favorite genre. I've read a lot of Agatha Christie, I've watched the entire Hercule Poirot TV show. This is my favorite thing, pretty much. So when Egghead Island turned into a whodunit style murder mystery, I was very excited. I will say I don't love the York reveal by the standards of whodunit mystery storytelling, right? Because you might be saying, well, the York reveal, it's a perfect twist because, you know, York stands for desire and the arc's themes are desire, therefore, it's like a brilliant setup and payoff. That's not really what you look for in whodunit style murder storytelling, right? If you look at the standards of what tends to go into that style of mystery storytelling, the goal is always ultimately to make the reader, at the moment of the final reveal, have a sort of click where suddenly all of the character who turned out to be the killer, all of their past actions, statements, and odd moments of behavior suddenly fall into place. All of those pieces that seemed a little bit off about them, all of those little things that they were doing or saying that seemed just a little bit awry, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it and you didn't really know why, everything suddenly makes sense. With York, it wasn't like that because Oda just didn't have her do anything the entire arc, right? So it is a little basic to be like, well, she stands for desire and the arc's theme is desire, therefore it's brilliant, because that's not really what you're looking for when you're trying to have that sort of click moment with the big reveal of a whodunit style murder mystery. It's more about the action statements, it's following the plot and storyline of that character, right? And having that fall into place. That being said, while I would say something like Kanjuro, that fit more of what you're looking for with a whodunit style murder mystery, where we have this established question of, you know, there's a traitor, who's the traitor? And you have excellent theorists like, I believe Marco the theorist was able to put together lots of little odd things about Kanjuro, the hand he used, right hand versus left hand, or why he sent certain birds away and sent a message away at a certain point in the story. Things like that, all of that suddenly fell into place with the reveal that Kanjuro was the traitor. However, I ultimately think that York is a far more interesting reveal than Kanjuro, because I'm not just judging it based on the idea of, okay, what pulled off a murder mystery setup better? Because at the end of the day, the murder mystery plotline in Egghead was fairly short. What matters more to me is that once Kanjuro was revealed as the traitor, it didn't really matter anymore what happened with his character. I found it being interesting that, you know, it turned out to be him, but I felt as though almost any other scabbard could have been swapped in his place, and I wouldn't really have cared. Could have been, instead of Kurozumi Kanjuro, it turns out to be Kurozumi Raizo, with just a few different hints or suggestions or teases or whatever swapped throughout their little plot lines, right? It could have been either one of them. I didn't care enough for it to matter. With York, because York represents something in the story that goes directly to the story's themes, thematically, I appreciate much more what this York reveal could mean for the deeper ideas of Egghead Island. Because again, we have this idea of desire being played up so much throughout this arc, the idea that with York we can finally explore this theme and sort of the dark side of dreams, which is desire, right? Desire and dreams are the same thing. You get that much from Vegapunk's speech about devil fruits. With York we can finally explore the dark side of dreams in a way that makes a lot of sense as being necessary as we enter this final segment of the final arc, of the final saga, right? Because we begin this with Luffy talking about his greatest desire. So to see a man like Vegapunk, who has been framed to us as mainly a protagonist, but with some questionable aspects to his ideology and his goals, and then to say, well, we've had the desire section of him actually completely separated from him as a character, and now we're going to get to see what happens when that aspect of him is operating completely independently, and what that takes shape into. I think that has phenomenal implications for the rest of the arc, the ideas of Egghead, and what Oda wants to potentially say about desires and dreams. I think it also strongly justifies the existence of 6 satellite bodies for Vegapunk, which is something that I definitely pushed back a lot against over the course of the arc, because to me it was just like, okay, if he just wants to do this to have more characters for the sake of more characters, or to play into a brief little mystery plotline, that's not enough to sell me on the idea that we need this many characters to join on board the Straw Hat's ship or something going out of Egghead Island, right? But with York, it justifies the concept in my mind quite a bit, because if the real goal was basically to get at this idea of, okay, what happens when you separate a man, even a well-intentioned man's desires, from the main body, right? And just have that roam free and independent. What could that lead to? What type of persona could take shape there, right? And what does that say about human nature and particularly Vegapunk's nature, right? Well, I guess human nature in general is going to be more important. Let's see if Oda goes there with that, but I think that the potential is certainly there. And you can only kind of justify that if you also have Vegapunk remove the other aspects of his personalities first, right? So I would almost say that rather than picking one side, you know, having the idea of splitting up the personalities and then thinking one of them could be evil, I wonder if it was more so that Oda wanted to write an arc where, you know, this genius scientist's desires was actually turned into a separate entity from the main body. And the only way to kind of justify why that would even be a thing would be if there's a sort of general masquerade going on, or, you know, a broader sense of, I guess, red herrings as to their purpose, basically by separating out all aspects of his personality. So we think that the important thing is basically, oh, he's got all aspects of his personality separate. I'm sure that, you know, that's just to have a zanier cast of characters, when in reality the goal was probably just to introduce one particular villain for the arc that would only make sense to exist if you've also got Vegapunk doing this with every aspect of his personality, right? So I think that that's a really, really interesting decision. Now, in retrospect, I'm sorry for ever doubting the six-body idea. Now I'm very excited for it. I'm excited to see where York goes as a villain, because I think York has the potential to be one of the most interesting villains in the story. I will also give one more piece of credit, at the very least, to the reveal that it was York. This is outside of the thematic stuff, more so just the idea that I think York, if you had to have people guess, just blindly guess as to which Vegapunk body it would be, I think most people might have landed on York being the one you least suspect, just because, I mean, look at her. She doesn't do any. She seems to have no brain. She seems like the most harmless and the most forgettable almost, or the most gag type of all of the Vegapunks, which leads to her being, you know, the one you least suspect just intuitively. And you know what they say about mysteries, the one you least suspect is the one that it most likely turns out to be, which is kind of why, you know, even me, when I was trying to, I had my own guesses obviously, but if I had to pick out of the Vegapunk bodies, I was kind of, initially I leaned towards Shaka like a lot of people, because that would have been the coolest twist on the surface. I think this twist is cooler now in retrospect, right? But Shaka would have been the coolest on the surface. Then Shaka was kind of eliminated, so we're like, okay, maybe it's Edison or Pythagoras, and I was just like, those are boring, but they, you know, they make sense. York is not boring, especially with the new sort of sinister, gleeful persona that she's pulling out. I mean, this is the true dark side of greed, the true dark side of desire. The thing that I will say that is a little bit confusing about this, that I think we still need answers for, and one of the reasons that many of us just crossed off most of the Vegapunk bodies in general is, one, we saw all the Vegapunk bodies, we saw York while the cameras were being taken out, we saw her with the Straw Hats, so what was going on there? How was she taking out the cameras? The simple assumption, if I had to make a guess, would be that she commanded one of the Seraphim to do it. I think that would make sense. The bigger question is, what about the syncing of information with Punk Records? Because supposedly she's been doing that. Supposedly all of them have been doing that. So if they've all been doing that, how would it be possible that the other satellite bodies and Stella himself don't know what York is up to? So that's the biggest two questions that Oda needs to answer, particularly the Punk Records syncing aspect, but I'm sure that there's a good answer for that around the corner. Now, all the York stuff aside, Sanji. The Sanji situation is an interesting one. I would go so far as to say this. This is the best Sanji chapter any Sanji fan could have ever asked for in the New World. It is probably the most satisfying Sanji chapter any Sanji fan has had in the entire New World. Now you might be saying, more, what about a whole cake? What about, you know, him calling Robin for help and stuff? Cool, nice character stuff, but we all know at the end of the day, Sanji fan, I mean, this is not to call it Sanji fan, any fan, right? Any fan of any character, whatever, you love your character moments, right? But you also just like the moments where the character seems cool, or badass, or hype, right? This is the first moment in all of post-time skip. Sanji has gotten good moments and everything like that, right? He swooped in, took out Queen and Perospero in one attack, he swooped in and saved the crew from Doflamingo and everything like that. He's had cool moments, right? We're not trying to say that. But the difference here is that this is a chapter, a rare chapter, where Luffy and Zoro are made to look bad, while Sanji is made to look really good against the same opponents. They're all up against Seraphim, and Oda chose to make Sanji look cool, where at the same time he chose to make Luffy and Zoro look kind of dumb and inept, when we know that they should be able to take out these Seraphim easier than they're doing, but they're just struggling and looking like clowns while they're doing it. On the flip side, you've got Sanji coming in looking like an absolute hero, who basically is just way above the Seraphim that he's facing, right? Well, let me make this clear. I reiterate this in my stream a lot, but this is not a power scaling statement. I'm not saying that Sanji is stronger than Luffy and Zoro. I'm just saying, how it feels reading the chapter. Reading the chapter, you're at the start of it, you're kind of tearing your hair out, being like, Luffy and Zoro, they look like absolute idiots. Lucci's even calling him out for being an idiot. Why are they being so incompetent against the Seraphim when we feel like they should be able to do better, right? We know that they can probably do better, but they just look incompetent. They look bad in the last couple chapters, right? Even if we know they can do better, they look bad, and they're being made to look bad in the last couple chapters. Get to the end of the chapter, Sanji's being made to look good, right? It's not about power scaling, who's stronger, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, what's the vibe being given for each character here? Luffy and Zoro being made to look bad, being made to look dumb. Sanji being made to look cool, actually hype, actually really, really, really competent, and maybe the most reliable person this chapter. That is something that has not happened there's nothing comparable. Post-time skip, there's not been a single moment that's comparable where Sanji looks good, and then the other two members of the Monster Trio don't look good, especially considering it's against the same set of opponents. It's almost unthinkable. So Sanji fans, treasure this moment, keep it in your hearts. You know what? If I were you, I would be wishing for a break next week so that you get to treasure it just one extra week longer, because who knows what happens in the future. I don't think Oda's going to make Sanji look bad, but I don't think he's going to make Luffy and Zoro look, as dumb as they've been looking much longer. I'm sure that they're going to pick things up as well, and I think all of the Monster Trio are going to get to shine in some way by the end of this, Seraphim conflict, right? So, that being said, this was quite a shock. I can't think of something like this since pre-time skip, really, for Sanji, right? A sort of contrast in portrayals between him and the rest of the Monster Trio. Sanji stuff aside, I think the only really other big thing to talk about is the upcoming Egghead Island incident. I'm saving all of that for the Tuesday video, so watch out for that. I think I have some very interesting thoughts about that, and I think it could be bigger than most people are even imagining, so just watch out for that. And before we finish this up, I have a comment from the Voice of the People, which is my top tier of patrons. So Dave Sakaran says, Oda signaled from the start that with Lilith, even a genius can't control and predict desire. So this was stated at the very beginning of the arc. Now Oda has desire being even more evil than Lilith. Wonder what that signals for the story's big villains at the end. I really am interested to see where this angle of, desire being potentially the most evil thing could go. And I like that it is in contrast with Lilith, who is supposed to be the evil one, but the idea being that, even Lilith doesn't get that bad, right? Lilith, she doesn't do anything that bad this arc. It's desire. Desire is the really dangerous one at the end of the day. And again, the idea of the mix between desires and dreams, they're basically two sides of the same coin. They essentially are the same coin, right? So for Oda to finally be portraying something as romanticized as dreams in the story as the ultimate evil of the arc, I'm very interested to see where that goes. So if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you all later.